So today's episode is going to be really kind of special to me because I have the honor of having these two guys on here that own a company that I've actually followed for a lot of years. And maybe you've seen their ads, maybe you know who they are, but it's Daniel Stafford and Robbie Switzer with ShopaNova. And if you don't know of ShopaNova, then you're probably not in the e-commerce space. But if you are and you're listening to this, then you probably heard of them or seen their stuff. I think I first came across their stuff from the ads years ago. And then I immediately had to bookmark you guys so that I could start stalking what you're doing and say, how do we arbitrage and gain from what you're doing for our clients? So I didn't funnel hack you, but I did at least start following you. And so if you don't know ShopaNova though, ShopaNova's done over $600 million in sales where the clients have spent over $100 million in ads. They've worked with over 400 brands. And more importantly, and I just learned this right before we jumped on here, and that is that they are both wrestling state champs. The question that I have for both of you, though, is who is the state champ? Because there's not two state champs. There's a state champ. So which one of you could beat up the other?
I'd probably say that's Robbie at this point.
That's Robbie?
I was 8 years old when I won state.
So you're bragging when you're 8. Yeah. Gotcha. Robbie, when did you win it?
Dude, those are old stats, brother. I was 4th and 5th grade.
I love it.
It's
stats nonetheless.
It's stats nonetheless. Yeah, you still got to use it.
Cool. I love it. And so the reason I wanted to bring both of these guys on is because, first of all of those stats are amazing. When you work with over 400 different brands, you learn a thing or two. What are the trends you begin to see? And when you spend $100 million on ads, you also learn a lot about advertising and how you can acquire new customers and do so successfully. And so I shot Daniel a message a few months ago and I said, hey, I'd love to meet you guys because I've looked up to ShopaNova. I've followed ShopaNova for a long time. And now ShopaNova meets the Ecommerce Alley. We're all here. And the entire goal of this episode is kind of to dive into what we're both seeing. And I'm curious about what you guys are seeing from the e-commerce landscape because things change. And I know you guys have been doing this since 2016, I think Robbie mentioned. And so you've seen a lot of stuff. And I kind of want to bring this to the foreground. What are you seeing working? What should the people be listening for so that they can go and apply to their businesses? And so let's do this. I'm excited to have you guys. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, dude. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, we're stoked to be here and honored by your words, man. We definitely look up to you in a lot of ways as well.
Well, thank you. Now, what I'd love to open with, and I'd kind of love to start focusing on is for you guys, you've worked with a lot of businesses. You still work with a ton of different brands. What are the big levers that you're seeing really move the needle for people? And I don't know about you, but July is always interesting for a lot of our clients. And summer is everyone's the summer sales slumps. And so I'm curious, what are you seeing as big levers that you've been able to pull in a good way, in summer, but then just even in the last 12 months, what are you guys seeing as a trend that anybody listening should be paying attention for?
Yeah. Daniel, you mind if I just kind of kick us off?
Send it.
So typically when we're trying to figure out how to boost somebody's sales, we look at a number of things prior to even jumping into the ad account that feel sometimes a little bit scary to address because it's not something that you can fix with the click of a button. But at the same time, there's still things that can be addressed that will serve you for the rest of your e-commerce journey. So before we even hop into the ad account, start looking at campaign structure, even different things that happen on the back end of a customer journey. We just want to look at the business as a whole. Specifically first, let's look at profit margins. We want to see 70% or better because that's going to make everything downstream of it so much easier. You don't have to get as good of results in the ad account. And for a lot of people, that's right away, if that's one of the big 5 levers, they're oh, shoot, I don't have 70% margins. Does that mean I'm doomed? And the answer is no, not at all. It might take a little bit more work to address, but it's way better to make the investments and do the work to fix that prior to spending, tens of thousands of dollars trying to get better results than what's reasonable from the ad account. So that's number one. Look at the margins. Number two, AOV. So right there, we're looking to see $70 or more. Again, this is just going to make everything inside of the ad account so much easier if you actually have a strong AOV. And there's so many different ways you can boost that. But what's up, Josh?
What I was going to say is, so let's say you're a subscription box, like 70% margin, I think for like some products will be a lot easier. Like a supplement, that is usually pretty simple to hit. Let's say I'm a subscription box and we work with a pretty good amount of them. On the high end, you're going to be looking at like 50%, maybe a little, very rarely would you be over 55 to 60%. Like how would you approach that from that standpoint?
Yeah, and I love that you just kind of segued. So above and beyond, we have the margins, we have the high AOV, but then strong LTV as well. So that's something where if you don't have as strong margins, but you have a subscription model or you have really good repeat purchases or a strong LTV, instantly you can kind of combat that. So they kind of influence one another back and forth. But that's another big thing is just having good purchase frequency, good repeat purchases, a strong LTV. If you don't have a strong LTV, you want to kind of make up for it either with margins or a big AOV, right? So a product that's maybe even $300-$400, if that's going to be the only purchase that you get, you're definitely going to want to aim for a higher AOV right out of the gate. And again, what we're trying to do with these levers is at a foundational level, create an environment for success. Because ads for us, like they're an awesome tool, but everybody wants them to be kind of like a silver bullet, something that's going to save them. And for a long time, people like viewed them as magic. And it's like, we can't actually somehow manipulate people to buy or twist their arm to buy. Like there's a tool, there's ways we can get in front of people, but we really need to create that environment for success to get reasonable results that still lead to profitable growth.
So so let's look at profit margin. Let's say I'm sitting at like 55, 60%, not subscription. What's something you do to get to 70%?
So this is again, where you have to be able to, consider your investments. We just had a client who they discontinued their agency services and they figured out how to start running the ads themselves, which again was a saving right out of the gate, just operationally. But then rather than continuing to spend $5,000-$10K a month and hardly making any money, they said, let's slow down. Let's bring fulfillment in-house. These guys specifically were graphic tees. So they got like a screen printer set up. They brought a couple young people in-house to actually run that. And now they're printing all of their garments personally. And these guys, I forget, Dan, maybe you know off the top of your head where they're at in terms of monthly revenue, but they just kind of quoted to us. They're like, dude, after we did that, we're pocketing an extra $25,000 a month rather than just doing like any type of outsource fulfillment or print on demand fulfillment. They were able to retain all of that money, which again, like for them, it just creates a much better environment for success because they used to have this break-even return on ad spend of like 3.3 on a blended return on ad spend. It's like, yeah, that's great. And you can probably get that. But their problem was every time they tried to scale, they would see that start to taper over time. And so they're kind of stuck on a plateau because of it. Now, after they've brought some of that in-house and really boosted their profit margin, they only need a 1.6x return to be like profitably acquiring customers. And then all the LTV and the customer volume that they can get from being able to invest more with easier to attain results is just like the cherry on top.
There's also like outside of just adjusting fulfillment, things on the back end, hard costs and fixed costs, things like that. Sometimes we'll help them create a new offer that actually costs more with one of their top selling products to create that margin as well on the front end, just for new customer acquisition. And then maybe LTV, like when people come back to buy, every single product isn't necessarily at 70%. But the one that we're acquiring customers for is, so we're able to spend more on ads.
Okay, so you're looking at profit, the profit margin on the front end of that first order, even if it means like maybe the product A is 50%, but then you have this really high margin product that costs no additional shipping weight that pulls the average up. That you're saying 70% on order number one?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it's across the board, right? But for a lot of brands, that's just not feasible. But is there a way we can create that on order number one so that we can be profitable on acquisition? Because most of the brands we're working with don't have tons of funding, aren't venture capital backed, all that, right? So they need to have some profit margin as they're scaling, because they want to do it from out of pocket and not go into a ton of debt. So that is a lever that we can pull.
Okay. Do you ever just increase the price to get to the margin too?
I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of people, they complain like, man, the cost of shipping is up. My supplier just raised their prices. Everybody around them has raised their prices, and yet they're still locked into the $25 price that they set just arbitrarily. Like, I think it's worth $25, so I'm going to post it at $25. It's like, dude, just raise your prices. And a lot of people do that, and you bump it by $5, $10. And typically you don't, what we've seen is it doesn't really hurt conversion a ton. Potentially with people that were kind of already in their circles, but for new customer acquisition, as long as it's a fair and reasonable price, I think a lot of people should consider just boosting their AOV a little bit.
Which almost segues into another big lever, which is branding, positioning. What's your unique selling proposition, right? So that you can charge better prices and not just, compete on price and race to the bottom, essentially. So how can you be the premium brand in your space that people know, like, and trust and want to buy from?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. What are some things you like, if you were to look at brand positioning, and I wholeheartedly agree. I'd rather be the most expensive or on the premium end. Like, the idea of competing on price never makes sense to me. I mean, like, we all hear that. What's so interesting is, like, we all hear that, it's not like the idea of, like, no one sets out and generally says, I want to be the cheapest, most affordable thing. Like, everyone hears that that's not a good idea, yet we do it. So when you think of, like, brand positioning, are there particular things that you do to like right out of the gates? Like, if you have someone that you're like, they just have call it the bland brand, and they're like, I don't know where to start. What's like one thing you're like, low hanging fruit, we do this right away? Yeah,
we actually have kind of like 5 things we do, and we're kind of running on, kind of our 5 big levers. And
5 levers, 5 things.
Yeah. Then we have 5, sub levers to the positioning one. But number one, we really do believe in building relationship equity, and being able to view our marketing efforts through the lens of relationship equity is really helpful, because when you're just running direct response ads and you're asking for the sale, we consider that action to be an ask, where you're actually withdrawing from that relationship equity account. And then there's this idea of like just brand building and giving value to your audience that builds goodwill, that builds relationship equity. And so we try to encourage our clients to have a good balance of both, where you're running direct response ads and you're asking for the order and you're making money, but you're also providing value to that audience without them even having to spend money. And so there's a few different ways you can build that relationship equity. You can do that through humor. You can do that through sentiment. You can do that through just real tangible value, maybe a free style guide, maybe a diet plan, maybe an exercise or a fitness plan. And there's basically these equity builders that we use on the organic marketing side that kind of keep us in good standing, where when we go to run ads and ask for the order, it doesn't feel like you're just that friend who's always asking and never giving. So that would be kind of one piece to, really just being thought of well inside your market. And it sounds a little bit weird to say, but all of your favorite brands probably do it really well. Chubbies, like, I'm a big fan of Chubbies. I'm always laughing at their content. And I actually followed them for a long time, just like laughing. I don't really care about shorts. I have like 4 pairs of Chubbies now, just because I loved the brand so much. But then too, you see like Super Bowl commercials, and they're all kind of playing into this idea of making people feel a part of a community, giving value, making people laugh, making them feel something, giving honor where honor is due, all these different things. The other thing that we really try to encourage people to do is provide a very specific solution to a specific person. Again, marketing 101, it's the basics, but when you get this positioning lever right, that's what's going to make your ads work in the first place. Because again, ads are not magic. Like they need to see and understand something that makes them want to buy if they're ever going to buy in the first place. And we can play with all the settings in the ad account, but if we don't get this right, it's going to be an uphill battle. The third lever we feel that is really key to having strong branding and positioning is just consistency. Consistency is basically maturity. You want to make sure that whatever lane you choose, you do that super, super consistently so that people can rely on you to be that person. Doesn't always have to be the premium brand because not everybody's on the market for a premium product. If I'm in the market to buy a sewing machine, there's the $7,000 version that can do all this embroidery and all these different things, but there's also the $300 version that does exactly what I need. And my budget, my preferences, exactly what I'm looking for, like all of that is going to determine where I sit in the market. But if you don't call that person out specifically, you're just going to be a watered down version of that, of your competitors. And so we want people to be very specific, to call those people out. I think there's this fear that when you do get super specific, you're going to lose out on a lot of customers. And I think the opposite is actually true. I think everything becomes more potent when you're speaking very specifically to somebody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that and I don't know what you guys see, but like one of the most common trends of the brands that we'll work with that just like they launch anything, like call it like ads from day one, never run it before. And the moment they do it, it's like this hockey stick, like results from that. They usually have a very specific product for a very specific person. That's usually the observation that we see happen. So definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And then just to hit on those last two, making sure you're distinguished from your competitors. There's some fun things you can do even in the ad creative, us versus them type of content. But just making sure that you're different from everybody else. You can really lean into personal brand, personal story. If you do have a unique product, you can really lean into the features of that product to just make sure that you are an obvious choice for your customers. And the fifth and final one of branding and positioning that we really like to talk about is just having a clear value proposition. All of these are meant to answer the question, why should I buy from you? If you can't answer that question very succinctly, very concisely in a persuasive way, you're just going to waste a lot of money on ads. A great example of this is, the race to get the best MP3 player on the market. We had Apple versus Samsung or whoever it was. They were touting download speeds, bit rates, storage, all this stuff. And Steve Jobs came along. He said, I'm going to give you 1,000 songs in your pocket. So what is your version of 1,000 songs in your pocket? And it can be a little bit hard to wrap your mind around that if you don't feel like you have a super unique product. But for a lot of people, just being able to say, I give this type of product to this type of person because of these core attributes and values, and we do it every single time, like that's enough to win over a customer. And you would never write copy in that way, but having a super clear idea of your branding and positioning will make all of the ad creative so much easier to build and so much more powerful when it comes to actually running the ads. And when you do it right, like Dan, I feel like you should share a little bit about Bryant because they kind of nailed that right out of the gate. And then
so there was this company, it's called the Adventure Challenge. Shout out to Adventure Challenge, but they have this book basically, and it's a scratch off for like date nights. So you open it up with your partner, scratch something off, and it'll tell you what to do for that night. Anyways, they launched like 7 years ago, but I remember they came to us like 30 days after they launched, and they were at like $100,000 a month. They had no pixel set up on their Shopify store, and they're running a video views campaign, and that was it. Just video views. And
makes you cringe just
spending a lot
it.
of money on it. Yeah, like they're like, I don't know where the sales are coming from because none of it was tracked. But it was a really solid piece of creative, speaking to the exact person it was for with a really good product. And then they just blew up. Then obviously once we like put tracking in and set up a campaign structure, like it took them to the next level to like $10,000 days really quickly. But it's because they had a really good product for the right person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, do you guys, I actually have an adventure challenge book. Yeah, I think
nice.
we have one. We did like 5 or something, and then I haven't opened it since, but we have one. I do know that. That's a pretty big brand. That's pretty cool. So it's a super unique product too. I think they have such a unique edge in that regard. And I think most people listening probably are like, they have this like a little bit more saturated, kind of an space that they're in. But it doesn't, anyone listening to this shouldn't discount, you shouldn't roll it out and be like, well, I'm already in a saturated space, blah, blah, blah. I don't have a unique product. You have to figure this stuff out. Your value prop, how are you distinguished? Are you consistent? How do you speak a specific solution to a specific person? And how do you begin to build relationship equity? And on the relationship equity side, I feel like, do you do 2 of those in one? Because when I hear humor or sentiment, to me, I'm like, how do I direct response humor and sentiment at the same time so that way I can ROI the dollars behind the relationship equity building?
Yeah, we tell people like pick 1 or 2. You can do more, but typically it really starts to contribute to your brand identity. But you can definitely overlap some of them for sure. And then you want to make sure that content makes its way not just into your, let's say your TikTok feed, but maybe sprinkle a little bit of that into your email flows, into your ads themselves. Another question we get a lot in that specifically is like, how much is too much? How much humor is too much? Because I think we can all think of some pretty funny ways to stop the scroll and to jar the audience and to grab attention. But the real, I guess, guiding light there is it conducive to them becoming a customer? Is it creating some intent for them to actually buy? If they're just following your page for the laughs, and they're actually like off put when you finally go to do a product drop, you've taken it too far. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing when it comes to these equity builders, whether that's humor, sentiment, inclusion, or value, that it's actually leading them towards becoming a customer. If you go too far, like you're just a meme page.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So profit margin 70%, AOV $70. I think 3 was LTV you focus on.
Yep, just healthy repeat purchase rate, strong LTV.
How do you identify it? Like, how do you measure that?
Honestly, we just end up looking a lot at the P&L. A lot of our decisions are based more off of the P&L than data directly from the ad account. And so depending on where you're at with margins, on customer acquisition, where you're at with AOV, again, like you can kind of make up for one by having a strong one kind of leading into that. So for us, it's just a matter of like really going through the P&L, running all the numbers and making sure that at the end of the day, once ad spend is covered, once fixed and variable costs are covered, are we actually profitable? And that's kind of how we start to build a picture of a healthy business.
And then to actually like measure the LTV, we're using Triple Whale.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and it's funny because most people have no idea what their LTV is, at least people that I talk to. So even helping them get clarity on what is their 3-month LTV is often a game changer. Cause then they're like, oh, I could actually spend some more on ads if they're going to, purchase that many more times in the next 90 days.
No, so I want to stop on that real quick. I think that everybody needs to know. So we look at it and we call it we look at the 30, the 60, the 90-day LTV. And based on the type of product that you are, you determine your threshold in which you're okay with your threshold in which you're okay with being upside down on an acquisition cost if you're okay with that and you have the cash to front the gap. But especially for like subscription boxes, because most subscription boxes are not profitable on month one. So we look at like what's the 30-day, 60 and 90, and what's the cash position or your appetite for how much you're able to hold the gap in that, so that you could be really intentional about that. I think that's really important that everybody, even if you don't have triple whale, everybody should calculate that and figure out. And just as I'm just going to throw, this is super nerdy math stuff here for everybody. If anyone listening is like, how do I understand my 30, my 60, 90? I don't have triple whale and I don't know how to find it. The best way to do it is to take your average order value and then go run a report for the last 30 days and divide I believe it's orders by customers to figure out your average purchase rate. And it's going to give you like a 1.27, multiply that times your AOV, and that'll give you your 30-day LTV. So if you can, I think that's really important to calculate because it educates you a lot to know how much you can pay to acquire a customer.
Hey, shout out to the math nerds that are going to go do that right now. I could never follow along and go do that.
Well, you know what? Actually, here's a better shot. If you want our KPI calculator, we actually have a spreadsheet that actually breaks it down and gives you the math on it. We'll put that in the description. You can download that.
Perfect.
Cool.
Calculators.
So, okay. So brand positioning, you mentioned 5. What's the fifth one? Fifth lever you guys pull?
So fifth one is just awesome experience. That can come directly from the products or just really putting in a lot of effort to make sure that there's a strong customer experience. And again, like that's pretty self-explanatory. But if you have these 5 things, you're doing well with those 5 things, growing a brand is so much easier. And your ads become so much more effective when you're actually doing well on all of those 5 big levers. So that's where we typically start. And then from there, we start actually getting into, the meta ad account, looking at the nurturing system set up through email and SMS, all of that, conversion rates on the landing page. We always try to put it in the context of like, are they even in an environment for success? And again, none of these should be viewed as like, a judgment like this is, if you're not hitting one of these marks, like it's doom and gloom from you from here on out. It's actually should be super encouraging because if you address these, everything is just going to be way more easy.
Okay. So you start to address those. So I'm listening. I'm like, all right, I'm working my profit margin, my AOV, LTV, brand positioning, work on that customer experience. Once you feel I'm adequate, I'm okay, now I'm going to have to see how this does. What are like the initial, like if there were from like a marketing, because obviously I'm going to have to dive into marketing stuff. If there's like first 2 things you do from a marketing standpoint or channels that you kind of roll out or focus attention on, what would that be?
So if you're less than 100K a month, we go straight to meta ads. For most brands, unless it's super solution aware, maybe Google ads would make a little bit more sense. But for most people, it's meta ads. And the biggest levers right out of the gate, let's simplify what you have going. Typically that's the number one action that we do, because it used to be that the competitive edge lied inside of, all these different campaigns, multiple different ad sets, hyper segmentation, just maniacally testing everything, which some degree of that is really good. But with the increased functionality and effectiveness of AI, we feel, and what we see for our clients is that more budget through less activity in the ad account is way more powerful, and it gives the AI what it needs to actually go out and find customers profitably. So typically it looks like a big restructuring of the ad account into a lot of times one campaign. And we're looking at, probably an Advantage Plus campaign for most people. The second big lever, aside from just like a big simplification of the ad account and really with the idea of trying to get as much data as possible through one objective, would just be the ad creative. And again, this kind of goes back to some of those big levers. We can play with bid caps, cost caps, all these different things. But if people don't like what they're seeing, if it's not creating an urge for them to click over and buy, like none of that's going to matter anyways. And so we take a deep dive in ad creative. So simple structure and just like really go hard on the ad creative for a while.
I love that. We recorded a podcast earlier this morning on like how we scale budgets in 2024. And one of the things I cover particularly in that is consolidated, simple scales. Like that's what you just have to, you got to look at the fact that like the landscape has changed, and the meta mantra at this point is just trust us. Like trust us with everything. Trust us with ASC to find your audience. You can't even select anything. Trust us to tell you what combinations inside a dynamic creative ad or a flexible ad are going to work best. And so very validating. Love that you guys are seeing that. So you definitely have to put a lot of attention on testing, finding creative, because the ads will really make that difference. It's not as much. And I would agree with that observation. Is the campaign structure everybody thinks is like this magic silver bullet thing that's going to solve all the problems. And there's so much more fundamental that are just completely ignored in the thought process that like a mechanic is going to fix the whole thing. And it's definitely not what we see work. I've seen the craziest ad structures that I'm like, that's something we did in like 2019. That doesn't even work anymore. And it works. And I'm like, the reason it works is they have all the positioning, they have the product right, and they have the ads just right.
Yeah. And I like to think about it too. Like what's Meta going to look like 10 years out? And it's only going to get more AI driven, more control on their end, just to make it more user friendly for everyone, right? Because then more people are on the platform spending money. And so I like to just constantly adopt it now and not get stuck on what was working yesterday, which honestly, for a lot of like real old school media buyers, they don't like it. Kind of pisses them off of like, I like to do it the manual way. It's like, okay, well, sometimes that still works better. And we're still testing it for some of our higher spend accounts. But oftentimes you just throw it in one campaign with all your budget, it's going to outperform.
Yeah, it is sad. Like nobody wants just like connect your Shopify store and hit the ads on button. But that might be where we're pointed. So, how can we kind of start to learn to use those tools? Because it's much more about training the algorithm of what we're doing than it is like manually figuring that all out by ourselves with spreadsheets. I was going to ask you though, when it comes to ad creative, I'm curious to hear your answer. Do you feel like there is one type of ad or an approach that you feel works most of the time that you really lean to for a lot of brands that you consult with and work with? Curious what your thoughts are, Josh.
So, I mean, if I was to look at types of ads and break them down into like, so there's a lot of just subcategory buckets. If you look at like lifestyle, you look at like flat lays, you look at ghost mannequins, depending on what the product is, you look at like UGC, or you look at like real high intent ads where it's like we're doing call outs to the benefits, the pain, the features, whatever it is. And it's like very clear. This is just I call them addy ads. Like it literally looks like an ad. Yep. My biggest observation, and one of the things, by the way, that we're known for and that we focus most of our attention on is ad testing and volume of ad testing. And I would say with the clients we work with, UGC had this phase. I feel like UGC came in and it's not doing nearly as well anymore. And everybody knows that it's like a hired billow person, that's filling, reading the script. What I see outperforming almost everything in all our coaching sessions and optimization with our clients every week is addy ads. Ads that literally just call attention to the product and the pain or the benefit, whatever it is. It's just calling it out and that's it. Like it's just it's like, this is the product. You either want it or you don't, which goes against the grain of so much copywriting, because in copywriting, we were just talking about this in brand positioning, we're taught to, well, maybe not everyone's taught, but if you read any books or gone through any training on it, it's like we're taught to focus on like extraction of pain, and we're taught to focus on the benefits, not the features and all. And what I'm seeing is really interesting is a lot of times you're saying, this is what it is. It has no palm oils in it. It has no sunflower oil in it. And it's goat milk fudge made from our farm in Vermont.
Yeah.
And it's chocolate walnut with the fudge. Yep. People just buy. And I don't know. It's interesting because like it's so counter to what we typically do and what I've seen for so many years. And I wouldn't say that's everybody. Everybody. It's definitely the minority. I'd say that it's definitely that's the majority, but there are a minority that you have to write these long form copy and really appease to the person's emotional senses or whatever it is. But now I don't know what you guys see, but I just see like Addy ads are doing really well right now, and videos in particular from a media standpoint are doing worse.
Yeah, it's funny, huh? You're right. UGC is kind of like ever since all the UGC companies came out and it's like fake influencers now, it seems like it's just kind of been on the decline. So I feel like we're seeing the same thing. And it's like a lot of our Canva templates are Addy ads, certain discount code maybe for the time of year or for new customer acquisition, 20% off your first order with a picture of the product. But then we're also using just a ton of top of funnel DPAs, making sure it's set up right in the back end for Shopify. Yeah. And we're actually seeing, if you have a video in your Shopify store, even pulling those in for some of the DPAs can work really well too.
That's the one I was going to say is like dynamic product ads, just pulling directly from the product pages. Those we seem to just scale really hard with those. And so a lot of people don't make the connection that when I'm setting up my product page, if I'm going to use a DPA, like this is my ad creative. So that featured image, don't just do like product on a white background, maybe throw the lifestyle image right there in your product images so that once it gets pulled into the dynamic product ad, it actually looks appealing, but then we still have kind of that dynamic super functional, like shoppable carousel. And again, like Daniel said, making sure the video comes in as well. And then some people, they try to save some load speed by doing a third party video and they like drop a link in there. That won't work. We had to diagnose that. So you want to make sure to actually put the video in Shopify if you want to use that functionality.
Yeah, no, that's good. Seeing the same thing. Catalog are doing really well. I think that as we all know, or at least we do here, like the AI and the machine learning of Facebook is getting so good that it's like, oh yeah, give us your catalog. We know that this person is looking for this product and we will find that person. You don't even have to give us the targeting options. We will just find them and we will find the product. And we've been seeing that work really, really well as well. Ooh, that's nice. That's cool. So you mentioned, Rob, you mentioned less than 100K. Heavy emphasis on $100,000 a month, heavy emphasis on Meta. What else are you focused on? Like, what's the second thing for you?
So like after 100K?
So under 100K, yes, over 100K. If you're over, what's the next threshold you look at? And then what's the focus shift?
Yeah, from there, we really want to start diversifying traffic sources. So that's typically when we'd launch, another paid social channel, whether that's TikTok or Pinterest. And then we'd also really make sure that they're doing well on Google at that point. Just because you're creating enough brand awareness and you're kind of starting to create demand for your store with a disruption strategy on social, that naturally there's going to be some opportunity capture available directly on Google. And so we try to catch a lot of that with Google. And then, of course, since we're there, we'll definitely do some search-based stuff, some PMAX stuff as well. But really after the 100K mark, we're looking at, like you said, kind of scaling out horizontally, incorporating more channels, and starting to just create more of a overall brand presence and an overall ecosystem of the marketing, rather than just like, hey, I have my evergreen funnel over here with a flagship offer that I get customers from every single time on Meta. This is kind of like phase 2 of how do we expand that and how do we get in front of people that we would normally not be hitting.
And I'd even say brands less than 100K too. We're saying launch on Google, because with Meta and Google, you're covering like 90% of the internet, right? At that point. And one thing nice about Google, it's so consistent. And once it's validated and the AI is kind of locked in, you're not seeing the big ups and downs like you can often see in Meta. It's a lot more stable, consistent. And a lot of times the return on ad spend actually rivals what we're seeing on Meta. And it's just that's like always where I'm pointing people. Number two, make sure Google's dialed in. It's going to take a little longer to validate, but once it's validated, it scales pretty good and more consistently.
So it sounds like if we look at everything, it sounds like everything kind of comes back to the foundation of profit margin, AOV, LTV, brand positioning, experience. That's like the base that everything is then built upon that. And maybe it sounds like the first layer is Meta is a high emphasis for you, which Definitely. Ties back to that base foundation. And then you have Google that probably also ties back to the base foundation. But the interesting thing that I've heard here that's also very validating for me, so thank you, and that is that all you've mentioned so far is paid advertising once you have foundations done. So your emphasis is largely on paid advertising to really grow and then scale any kind of an e-commerce business, which is great because that's all. I don't preach organic to almost anybody.
No. We don't either. Yeah. And I guess the only other piece that was kind of hidden in the LTV pillar is email and SMS.
Yeah.
We want to be able to acquire a decent amount of our revenue through there, like maybe 20 to 30%. That's once you get people into the system. That's not like a customer acquisition strategy, but it's definitely one that helps you get profit on the back end once you're looking at the P&L. We don't mess around with
we do a little coaching on organic because I think it does feed into the branding, positioning, giving your customers value. But it's not going to scale you nearly as quick as paid media. It's more just a lot of times fuels your paid ads, and organic. If you find a good post, right, you can repurpose it into the paid ads. It's almost all just to feed the paid ads from my perspective.
Yeah.
Well, and there's not a lot of consistency. So people that do well, maybe they get an awesome influencer and affiliate network, but it's quite the roller coaster from what we've seen.
Yeah. And then reels are trending and then they're not. And then everyone is pissed off at Instagram. Like, oh, my organic doesn't work. So they have to pivot their entire strategy.
Yeah.
And that happens every year. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, to be honest, I love it because then what everyone eventually realizes is I need to learn how to run ads, and then they just come to us. And so that's the good news about organic. Keep doing your thing because all the algorithmic changes make advertising just that much more appealing. And so big takeaway from anyone here is you need the foundation. Profit margin 70% plus, AOV $70 plus. Focus on the LTV, brand positioning, and then really hone in your customer experience. Everything comes back to that. And like these guys just said here, you have to master and have a large emphasis on paid advertising, because if you are not, you're going to live in these peaks and valleys and living in the algorithmic trenches of whatever the heck TikTok or Facebook or Instagram decide to do that week or that day. So this is awesome. This is great because it's validating for like the stuff that I've also been saying this whole time. You need ads as this core piece. And then that other, like you just said, Robbie, that sub layer, email and SMS. And you mentioned 20 to 30% of your revenue will likely end up coming from that. That's good stuff.
Can I mention one final kind of observation of the type of people we talk to as kind of like a common pitfall thing? So there's a lot of brands that come to us looking to grow their brand with ads after they've hit a certain amount organically. So maybe they had a brick and mortar boutique. They're up at like 60, 70K. They have some online sales coming in and they're trying to integrate ads backwards, like meaning they got to where they are now without ads and that it was never a building block of their growth strategy. Well, now they're stuck on a plateau and they're trying to incorporate it, but they're not able to appreciate the investment of ads because it's like, what? I'm going to go pay $10K a month and my sales are only going to go up at whatever percentage. Like that's a really hard thing for people to grasp. So if you're a brand starting out, it's much better to build that, to engineer that into your business as a cost that's always there. And then as long as you're just managing that, like we recommend, somewhere around the 20% of your revenue being invested back into ads. Can be more depending on how aggressive you want to be, and it can be less depending on the size of the brand. But if you've never considered that cost and you think you're going to continue growing without it, it can be just a really challenging mindset bottleneck for people. So much better to integrate it as like, this is a core piece of my business. This cost will always be there. And that's what's going to allow it to grow over time and not hit a ceiling where you're just going to get stuck there forever.
I love it. That's good stuff. Well, Robbie, Daniel, I appreciate both of you guys. Seriously, thanks for spending time hanging out with me. Everybody, if you don't know who Robbie or Daniel are, go find them on Instagram. I know they're both very active on Instagram because that's where I follow you. Daniel Stafford and Robbie Switzer, just like Switzerland, but without the land. That's how you spell it. Go check both of them out. Check out ShopaNova, who is an incredible company, and they do a lot of really, really cool stuff in the e-commerce space. They clearly know what they're talking about. And we'll see you in the next episode.